Hi, everyone. Welcome to Christian Virtual Fellowship, and I'm glad you could join us tonight. Tonight, I will be sharing the story of the Bible of the character Dinah. Um, just a warning about this story. If you have young ears or anyone sensitive to the topic of sexual assault or violence, this might not be a good night to tune in with us, but um, just that's kind of how the nature of the Bible is. It tells things how it is. So there will often be things that are sensitive. So just giving a heads up on that. Um, so tonight we're going to be talking about Dinah in the Bible. She's maybe a kind of a lesser known Bible character, and actually I sort of had a hard time deciding how to present her story because she's she's kind of more of a passive character, as we'll see. So who was Dinah? Um, so Dinah was the daughter of the biblical patriarch Jacob and his wife Leah, and she's the only daughter that is mentioned by name in the Bible. However, her story is significant to the story of the nation of Israel, which we'll learn as we go along with this story. Her name means justified, and God will judge. And so the thing that was a little bit hard to share about her, a lot of times when we teach about a Bible character, we talk about the things that they did, that they actively did, that were either for good or for bad, or things that affected the course of history, or things that we can learn from. But what's different about Dinah is basically we kind of learn what happened to her. And this is actually a pretty tragic story of her life. She didn't really have a lot of choice of what happened to her. And so it's interesting that how God continues to work through this bad situation, though, and how her story and kind of the aftermath of that had major effects on the nation of Israel. So we don't want to minimize some of the bad things that happened to her just because God was working through the situation. We never want to do that when it comes to tragic events, but we do see the purpose in including her story in the Bible, and we can learn some lessons from the things that happened. Um, and I just want a little note that her name is kind of her name meaning is ironic because her name means justified. And sometimes it means God will judge. So it's supposed to be true justice exacted by God. But as we'll see in the story, her brothers actually try to take over the justice aspect of the situation, and that's not exactly how God intended for justice to work. And so the story of her rape and the consequent revenge is told in Genesis 34. So we're going to look at this passage and see exactly what happened to Dinah, and we'll see what the significance is of this story in the biblical narrative. So if you kind of look at this story, I kind of am presenting it in kind of three acts, if you will, if this is a narrative. So we see that we start in Genesis 34 and in verse 1. And so I'll read verses 1 through 6 so we can see kind of where we start here. It says, "Now Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom she bore to Jacob, went to meet the young women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, who ruled that area, saw her, he grabbed her, forced himself on her, and sexually assaulted her. Then he became very attached to Dinah, Jacob's daughter. He fell in love with the young woman and spoke romantically to her. Shechem said to his father Hamor, 'Acquire this young girl as my wife.' When Jacob heard that Shechem had violated his daughter Dinah, his sons were with the livestock in the field. So Jacob remained silent until they came in. Then Shechem's father Hamor went to speak with Jacob about Dinah." So as we see, this narrative starts with basically Dinah was just going out to just hang out with other women. her own age, and there's no mention of anything she was doing anything wrong here. She just was out visiting with friends. And then a man named Shechem, who was overtaken by lust and raped her. So that was a pretty tragic thing that happened here. And then we find out that Shechem, at least what he says, is that he fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. It sounds more like he's just desiring her for his own benefit. I don't know if you can really call that true love, but that's how he viewed it. So he was talking about wanting to go and marry Dinah. And we'll see later, if you look in the Old Testament law, we'll see that in this kind of situation, that was definitely the improper order. And this kind of act is definitely not condoned in any way in the Bible, and there are consequences for that. So we see in Deuteronomy 22 that God really cares about people in this situation, and that he does not consider a victim of rape or assault to be at fault for what happened. So he provides protections for such incidences. So we see that the Shechem, though, had his father talk to Jacob about Dinah, and he thought that he could maybe marry her. So next we'll see that Dinah's brothers were not happy about what happened, and that they sought revenge on Shechem. So if we look at verses 7 through 29, it says, "Now Jacob's sons had come in from the field when they heard the news. They were offended and very angry because Shechem had disgraced Israel by sexually assaulting Jacob's daughter, a crime that should not be committed. But Hamor made this appeal to them. 'My son Shechem is in love with your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Let us marry your daughters and take our daughters as wives for yourselves. You may live among us, and the land will be open to you. Live in it, travel freely in it, and acquire property in it.' Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, 'Let me find favor in your sight, and whatever you require of me, I'll give. You can make the bride price and the gift I must bring very expensive, and I'll give whatever you ask of me. Just give me the young woman as my wife.' Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully when they spoke, because Shechem had violated their sister Dinah. They said to them, 'We cannot give our sister to a man who is not circumcised, for it would be a disgrace to us. We will give you our consent on this one condition. You must become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters to marry, and we will take your daughters as wives for ourselves, and we will live among you and become one people. But if you do not agree to our terms by being circumcised, then we will take our sister and depart.' Their offer pleased Hamor and his son Shechem, so they were willing to do this, even though it would require pretty drastic measures. So Shechem really wanted to marry Dinah. The young man did not delay in doing what they asked, because he wanted Jacob's daughter Dinah badly. So definitely we see that here. Now he was more important than anyone in his father's household. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city. 'These men are at peace with us, so let them live in the land and travel freely in it, for the land is wide enough for them. We will take their daughters for wives, and we will give them our daughters to marry. Only on this one condition will these men consent to live with us and become one people. They demand that every male among us be circumcised just as they are circumcised. If we do so, won't their livestock, their property, and all their animals become ours? So let's consent to their demands, so they will live among us.' So it sounds like they're really wanting to merge with these people for their own benefits. And so all the men who assembled at the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem. Every male who assembled at the city gate was circumcised. In 3 days, when they were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and went to the unsuspecting city and slaughtered every male. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, took Dinah from Shechem's house, and left. Jacob's sons killed them and looted the city because their sister had been violated. They took their flocks, herds, and donkeys, as well as everything in the city and the surrounding fields. They captured as plunder all their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives, including everything in the houses. So we see that here the brothers were very upset and angry and disgraced because of what Shechem had done to their family by dishonoring and violating Dinah here. And so we see that they hatch a plan here to have all the men become circumcised, of course. And then we see that as they're still several days afterward, still feeling pretty badly in pain. This is not really a procedure you want done as an adult. So they're still pretty vulnerable and not able to fight back. So they take advantage of that and they kill them all. So they took everything these people had, which this was pretty severe retaliation. That was not that Jacob, as we'll see, is not very happy about how that happened. We'll see in verse 30, it says, Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, You have brought ruin on me by making a foul odor among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. I am few in number. They will join forces against me and attack me, and both I and my family will be destroyed. But Simeon and Levi replied, Should he treat our sister like a common prostitute? So Jacob is very worried that there will be retaliation for this from the surrounding peoples, and that he won't be able to defend their group, their family. And so it's going to be very difficult for him to accept what's happened here. So he has to come up with some kind of plan to protect his family. Simeon and Levi don't really see a problem with what they've done. They're still pretty upset about what happened, which very understandable given the circumstances, but this I don't think has resolved the problem. So what happens next? The aftermath of this situation. It says, and we're going to look at Genesis 35, and it says, Then God said to Jacob, Go up at once to Bethel and live there. Make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob told his household and all who were with him, Get rid of the foreign gods you have among you. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. Let us go up at once to Bethel. Then I will make an altar there to God, who responded to me in my time of distress and has been with me wherever I went. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods that were in their possession and the rings that were in their ears. Jacob buried them under the oak near Shechem, and they started on their journey. The surrounding cities were afraid of God, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. Jacob and all those who were with him arrived at Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. He built an altar there and named the place El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak below Bethel. Thus it was named Oak of Weeping. God appeared to Jacob again, and after he returned from Padan Aram, and blessed him. God said to him, Your name is Jacob, but your name will no longer be called Jacob. Israel will be your name. So God named him Israel. Then God said to him, I am the sovereign God. Be fruitful and multiply, and nation, even a company of nations, will descend from you. Kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you. To your descendants, I will also give this land. Then God went up from the place where he spoke with him. So Jacob set up a sacred stone pillar in the place where God spoke with him. He poured out a drink offering on it, and then he poured oil on it. Jacob named the place where God spoke with him Bethel. So we see that the family had to move back to Bethel for their safety. And Jacob's response here is really interesting. And I think the key to this family, kind of having a turning point here, they had false gods and idols that they were worshiping and keeping around in their households. And so he instructed his family to get rid of all these things and to purify themselves, because he sees that doing that is going to be very important to being able to be in God's favor and having help from God they really needed in this time. So the family obeyed Jacob and buried their idols, and they set up and Jacob set up an altar to the one true God. And the place is named El Bethel, which means God of Bethel. And here we see this is where God changed Jacob's name to Israel, and he affirmed the future nation that would descend from him. So very important point in Israel's history. So if we're thinking this story is kind of weird, maybe just just a really violent story that is obscure here. I think we can see that this is a result of that thing happening to the family, and they're turning back to God and allowing him to work through their family to change the future of the nation of Israel. So the last that we hear about Dinah, she's listed among all 66 family members who journeyed to Egypt in Genesis 46:15. This doesn't tell us, did she get married? Did she have children? I don't know exactly, we don't know exactly what happened to her, but when they list out the family members in 46:15, it says, these are the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Padan Aram, along with Dinah, his daughter. His sons and daughters numbered 33 in all. So we see there were, she was included here. So apparently she stayed with the family and continued her life. And, so we see that she's still there. But we will also see later on that Jacob still remembers what Simeon and Levi did as a result of her assault, and how he still is not happy with how they handled that. So on his deathbed in Genesis 49 verses 5-7, some of his sons he gave his blessing, which was a thing that they did, that fathers would do at the end of their lives, would give their sons blessings or curses if they had dishonored the family. In verse 5, it says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their knives. O my soul, do not come into their council. Do not be united to their assembly, my heart. For in their anger they have killed men, and for pleasure they have hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their fury, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So we see here that Jacob is condemning the violent acts that they did even years later. And they're not allowed to, to have leadership, have a family blessing because of the things they did. They're not going to have prominence in the family. So we still see that there were consequences coming forth years later for the things that they did. Okay, so that was a pretty straightforward look at this story. And so there are a few different things that we can learn from this story. So first of all, we learn from what happened to Dinah that sometimes bad things happen to innocent people. We don't always have control over the bad things that happen to us. We can't always prevent them from happening. That's an unfortunate result of just living in a broken world where there's just sin is rampant. People are selfish and don't care what happens to other people. And just tragic things happen. However, this does not mean that God does not care about our suffering. I think that's the thing that we have to remember, and to keep us going. I think that we'll fall apart if we don't remember that, because we need God. We need to go to God when we're struggling with things, when we're going through hard things beyond our control. We also see here from the actions of the men, Shechem's men, that doing terrible things to people a lot is a result of the sin in your heart. If you have lust and violence in your heart, you can do some pretty terrible things that can have really bad consequences. So they can lead to horrible actions, such as the rape that occurred in this story. So eventually, you will get caught at some point, whether God sees it happen or other people do. So there are big consequences for that kind of thing. So we have to be really careful about not allowing selfish and violent and lustful motives to take over our minds and our actions. We also see here that no matter what terrible things happen to you, trying to have revenge or having revenge on others can also have severe consequences. We are not supposed to have revenge. There's justice and there's revenge, and that can also have severe consequences that can alter the course of many lives and can affect many people. So we should seek God for wisdom on how to respond rightly when an injustice happens, instead of trying to exact vengeance on other people. That's not our place to do that. And then also we see here that even out of terrible circumstances, God can work. He can still work through that, and he can bring a new beginning. And so we see here that he did that for Jacob's family. He brought them to Bethel, and later on as a kind of a refuge place for his family. And then later on, they ended up in Egypt when they went through famine. And so the family did keep its name. It did stay together, and they did form the nation of Israel. So we can see that God does make great things happen out of tragedy. And so we know that God has good plans for our lives. And so we really have to keep that in mind if we're going to overcome the pain that we experience in this world. There's just no other way to handle it. And also we see that submission to God and trusting him is the beginning to healing from tragedy and hurt, pain, sin, anything that we're struggling with in life. That we've got to give that over to God if we're going to move forward. And that's what we see happening here in this story. Finally, I kind of like to end with a quote, or just a small point to kind of leave with everyone. Whenever I, at the end of a teaching, it's kind of interesting and to just have a little point to leave with. So I found this prayer, I thought kind of connected with what happened in the story, kind of the themes that were here, and some things that we can strive to have in our lives, the things that we want to be thinking about. So if you want to kind of think through this prayer in your heart and just meditate on it. It says, Holy One of Israel, covenant keeper, you restore what is lost, heal what is wounded, and gather in those who have been rejected. Give us the faith to speak and act in ways that reflect your love and heart for justice, that the outcast may be welcomed and all people may be blessed. Amen. So that's all that I had to share with that. And I thank you for watching and hope that you'll join us if you are watching this on YouTube.